PGAVC is committed to providing quality information to its members across a variety of topics. One topic that we receive feedback as being important is financial planning, personal financial planning. So today we're thrilled to be joined by Brad Matthews, a certified financial planner at McKechnie Matthews Group, but also as a background as a PGA of Canada golf professional. So a little extra legitimacy there, Brad, to this group. Yeah, excellent. I couldn't think of a better person to advise us in this space. I do also want to point out Brad has generously donated his speaker fee today, so we're going to be able to reallocate that towards our Junior Golf Week initiative. So Brad, thank you very much for your generosity there. As I am about to turn control over to Brad, I'm going to remind everyone, please feel free to ask questions as we go by using the chat dialogue. I'm going to monitor those. We'll kind of compile a bunch of Q&A that we can throw at Brad for the end of the session. In the meantime, if you click up in the top right corner of your screen and adjust the view to side-by-side speaker, that is our recommended way of viewing this presentation. But that's it for me. Mr. Matthews, thank you very much again, and I'll say, take it away.
All right. Thanks very much, Mark. Pleasure to be here. I'm wearing my Level Wear PGA hoodie that just came in. Thank you very much. It was nice from the PGA to get some actually PGA logo equipment. So welcome, everybody. And yeah, as Mark said, my name is Brad Matthews. I'm a certified financial planner, but I was in the golf business starting at the age of 12, and I left when I was 43. So we'll get right into it. I don't think there's anyone here that works for the CRA, so we should be okay as long as no one's from the CRA. I don't work for them. I'd like to kind of go through what my journey was, and I started at unfortunately, I know you guys are in BC, so you probably won't recognize any of these clubs that I worked at, but I started at a little golf course called Beaverdale Golf and Country Club, and back when I started, you had to be 12 years old to be a member. They had an age limit back then. That's how old I am. And when you're around the club a lot, they start to put you to work. So I started as a ball spotter. I moved into cleaning clubs in the back shop, and then I joined the PGA right out of high school when I was 18 years old. I worked a couple of years at Beaverdale as the assistant golf pro. We weren't busy enough, so in the spring and the fall, I actually worked on the golf course, cutting greens, airifying tees, fairways, things like that. And then I actually went to University of Guelph for the short turf course because I thought if I was going to be a golf pro, I better understand what superintendents are doing. After that stint, I went to Islington Golf Club in Toronto, worked for a gentleman, Jim McKittrick, had a good one-year private club experience there. Great golf club. But he was there 27 years and he was let go that year because a couple people on the board didn't like him. I didn't like that very much, so I actually got out of the golf business for 1 year. I went to Grand Bend and just built a building and hung up there. It's just near the Lake Huron, so most people go to Europe to find themselves. I went to Grand Bend, and that was a fun year. I was only 20 years old, so you can imagine being in a beach town for the summer, how much fun that was. But then Tony Curtin came calling to me, and I went to Craig Allen in Woodstock. Private club as well, but working for Tony, it was a great facility. We did a lot of teaching there. And I worked for the club, got paid by Tony Curtin, the golf pro, not the club. They also had a house on the 10th hole that me and the other assistant got to stay at for 2 years. So another great experience. Then I wrote my Class A exam at the end of that. So I finished that, got that finished. I had an opportunity to take a head pro job in Niagara Falls, which is a border town. I didn't really like it with the dollar. I didn't really like the area, so I didn't take it. And Gus Maui and Ron Silver were just starting Deer Ridge Golf Club in Kitchener. And that was the first equity golf club in our area. So in this area, I worked for the club, not the golf pro, but we also sold memberships. They started at about 40,000, ranging up to 56 for corporate membership. So another different spin. We did a lot of teaching here as well. And at that time, Ron and Gus both ran the golf dome in town. So in the wintertime, I would teach and work at the dome. And then in the summertime, I worked at the club. 1993, I got the opportunity to apply for a head pro job. This is my first head pro job at Elmira Golf Club, just north of Kitchener-Waterloo. It was a great experience. I owned the shop. I owned the carts. I owned the range. But I had to pay all the employees. So I incorporated. So this is another way of getting paid that we'll get into, but I had to get incorporated because I was afraid of liability if someone flipped a card. I didn't need them suing me. But I worked there for 8 years. We did a very good job up there. The golf club really thrived from 93 to when I left in 2000. And the reason I left in 2000, it was another golf course in town, Conestoga Golf and Country Club, that was for sale, and I tried to buy it. And the people at Elmira, it was a semi-private club, so the board caught wind that I was trying to buy it, so they asked me to leave because they thought I didn't want to be there anymore. And then the deal fell through, so I didn't have a job. Then Mike Turner called me from Whistlebear. It was just opening in 2001. I started there as the golf professional, and then I was the director of golf the following year. The great thing about Whistlebear was we ran the Canadian PGA Championship in 2004 and 2005, which was a nationwide tour event, and it was actually on the Golf Channel. And it was awesome. It's a lot of work to be put into anyone running a PGA Tour event. It was really busy. And the reason we did it, this was a strictly public facility, and the green fee around here tended to be about $50, $60. We were about 100. So we thought, if I always looked at Glen Abbey in Toronto, as since they had the Canadian Open, they were always they could charge more for a green fee, and they were always full. So we tried this. There was 3 owners of the club, so I didn't work for a board. And we did it in '04 and '05, and it really just didn't work out. So what we did in '06 is we went private. We wrote down some numbers. If we said 400 members at $5,000, we got $2 million, and the owners were like, do it. So that fall and spring, we sold 450 memberships and became private. I did tell them in 2007 when we were private that I'm probably not going to last too long because dealing with public, I found getting difficult back then. I don't know what it's like for you guys now, and I can't imagine what COVID was like for you, but I would think it was pretty difficult dealing with them. And the reason I bring that up, I've been paid every way, different ways in the golf industry. My final years at Whistlebear, I actually went as a consultant as the director of golf, so they paid me a flat fee. I was getting paid $10,000 a month, so I was paid $120,000 a year. And I did that because then I could split income with my wife, and the 3 owners really didn't care. I like to bring this up with you guys because I don't know if you know what a sole proprietorship is. And I always tell people in the golf business, you can kind of get paid different ways, even from the club and or your golf pro. So if you own a sole proprietorship compared to working for a club, you get more tax deductions. So the other thing that you can put into your sole proprietorship would be your winnings if you're playing some good golf, teaching income from the club if they're paying you personally and not going through the club. And then you'd have employee income from the club, so you kind of have a mix. And the reason I bring that up, if you're an employee, you get paid a salary, you pay tax, and then you pay your expenses at home and things like that. When you're a sole proprietor or a corporation, you get your income, you subtract your expenses, then pay tax. So it's really important to know the difference here, because obviously the person on the right is going to pay a lot less tax than the person on the left if they made the same amount of money. Okay, so always look into the options that you have. And like I was telling Mark before I actually got started here, I'm not here to sell anybody anything. I don't need any more clients. But I just want you to kind of know the differences in how you can get paid. So as a sole proprietor, here are some things that you could deduct from that income: travel expenses, any education that you look after, equipment, coaching fees, dues, your PGA dues, clothing. There's a little star behind clothing. It has to be logoed, and you just write it down as marketing. You don't say it's clothing because the CRA doesn't allow you to write off clothing. There was a major case. Everyone knows Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken. He tried to write off his white suits, and the CRA said no, because you could want to wear them personally. So back in Whistlebear days, we logoed everything. So we had Joe Boxers, our underwear, we actually logoed because it made it tax deductible for the golf professionals. Anything gym, workout room, meals, entertainment, marketing, even at the club becomes tax deductible if you're a sole proprietor. But if you're getting paid by the club, you can't deduct these things. So just some of the things that you could deduct. So it's important to kind of know how you get paid and what tax deductions you get. This is my team here. So I left in 2009, and I joined IG Wealth Management at that time by myself. So I grew my business up to we're managing now $350 million. I have a team of 9 people. This is the team that works with me now, and everything's going fantastic for us here in Ontario. We are the largest team in Ontario now. One thing I always like to make sure you understand too is certified financial planner, as Mark said, is kind of like being a PGA professional to go get a golf lesson. You don't want to go to someone at a bank that takes a course on a weekend and tells you that they're a financial planner. Just like you don't go get a golf lesson for someone that took the weekend course and now they want to teach. So we're different than accountants as well because accountants tend to look behind what you did last year. We're certified financial planners with that designation. We look into financial and detailed financial tax planning. We look at controlling emotions, retirement, estate planning as well. But a lot of people don't know in your lifetime after 18, you'll have 18 life changes before you retire. And what could that be? It could be a death, it could be a house, it could be kids, it could be marriage. Lots of different things that change. You could be moving away because in the golf business, sometimes you have to move to get the next job. So there's lots of life changes, and it's really important that your planning or your certified financial planner knows how to move the plan with you. We call it a living plan. It's not something it's one and done and away we go. It's something we look at every year. Our favorite saying around here, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. So when we look at retirement, everyone has a different vision in retirement. What do they want to do? Do they want to travel? Do they want to spend time with their grandkids? And let me tell you, when you're trying to figure that out, even in retirement, it changes in the first 2 years that you're retired. Then when you get a little bit older, everything's always changing. But really, when you look at retirement, you're trying to make sure that you save the right amount of money to live the way you want to when you retire. It's really important that you start saving. The biggest questions we get when we're dealing with our clients is when they get close to retirement, they're worried they're going to run out of money. So that's probably the biggest concern of our clients is to make it last. And then the second part is, can I maintain my same lifestyle, right? Protect my assets because I don't want to worry at night, right? Spend well. Most people that save well tend to spend well. People that don't save well tend to spend poorly. And then we have just obviously health. I tell a lot of people there's lots of problems in the world, but if health is one of them, you only have one problem, and that's health. And then leaving a legacy, this is where we look at when people are retired and they're spending the amount of money that they want to, and if there's going to be money left over, how do we get that to your beneficiaries tax efficiently before you die or when you die? The tough thing for retirement too is you look back 30, 40 years ago, people used to die younger. We used to always know people that retired and then died right away, especially coming out of a factory kind of work setting. But this is the average age now is 83 and 86. And now we have data that if a couple makes it to 65, there's a 90% chance that one of them will live to 90. So when we're working on our planning, we try to make sure we go to 90 years old. And I always tell people, and you think about it, you work for 40 years and then you're going to retire for 30. So to do that without working, you better make sure you're planning and saving. Under living is also a fear. What we do with most of our clients just before they retire, they know what they're going to be allowed to spend in retirement. We try to get them to do that before they retire so they feel comfortable with that number, whatever it is. In most cases, we do find that most people say, yeah, no problem, I'm leaving. I can live off this number. And like I said, everyone's worried about making their friends stressed. They want to make sure they enjoy retirement, make sure they're making the money. And that's just some percentages of Canadians of what their fear is. So you need a plan to support what you want. Like I said, I want you to try and find yourself a certified financial planner at your club. You probably know of one that's a member of your club. If not, look at some of the wealthy people and ask them who they use because they have a tendency to be using a good planner, and go have lunch with them to start to understand what you need to do going forward. Because the one thing that we all know is everything changes. And when people retire, and you'll probably notice this at clubs, someone retires, the first year is like a holiday. The second year is when they get really depressed. They tend to be emotional because they don't feel like they're contributing to society. So it's a wave in retirement. So it's something to watch out for. If you have some newly retired people and they're pretty grumpy, it's because of this. But the other thing, when we're looking at this would be a fixed income or fixed expenses that we would look at. And you're in retirement, it all changes because early on, hopefully you're healthy, so you'll retire. And then at the end of your life, you might need healthcare assistance. So we're always trying to make sure we're looking after everything. And then there's the money that you might spend, and you can see that tails off as we get older. And then any money left over, we make sure that we understand where it's going to and how. So peace of mind in retirement is achieving these goals. I get a lot of questions about rule of thumb. And rule of thumb for retirement, if you can get 60% of your income that you were making while you were working is a decent retirement, you're going to be very well off. You're going to be fine. If you have debt, that number should be 70%. So if you're making 100 grand a year in retirement, you want to make 60. And that would be a decent retirement. Hopefully you don't have any debt. So we want to make sure we spend wisely, optimize your assets, and manage your legacy. And that's part of the planning that all certified financial planners do. When we look at optimizing your assets, when you retire, you don't get a paycheck now from one place. You're going to get a multitude of money from different, what we call buckets. And when you look at the buckets, and this is a small version of it, hopefully you have RSPs. You might still teach a little bit, have a little bit of earned income. You might have some investment income. You might have some money in your corporation. But the two on the bottom right are numbers that we get from the government: Canada Pension Plan, we call CPP, and Old Age Security. And just to dive into those, when we get into retirement, liquidation order is very important because a lot of these things are taxed differently. So it's important that when you need $10,000 a month, what bucket should it come out of? And that's what we do. The Canada Pension Plan is contributory. You probably see it on your pay stub. Right now, that it raised 4 years ago to 5.95%. Employer puts in, and 5.95% the employee puts in. But you have to make up to a certain amount of money before it gets what we call full. That number is just over 80,000 now, which they raised as well a couple of years ago. It used to be around 40 to 45,000. So if you contributed the maximum for 32 years in Canada Pension Plan, your monthly amount would be $1,375 a month for the rest of your life when you turn 65. We look at the average, only 6% of Canadians actually max out because you have to max it out for 32 years. And you can't go back and pay more once you have more money. So the average really is around 59% of that number. So you almost, if you're average, you're going to receive $755 a month from Canada Pension Plan for the rest of your life. On old age security, it comes from the tax base. So the only thing you have to do is basically live in the country for 40 years after the age of 18, and you get the full benefit. And it's a way the government kind of says you paid us taxes for 45 years. Let's give you some of that money back. So here are the numbers that currently are the number. They go up with cost of living every year. Right now it's $713 a month from 65 to 74. And then they raise it actually at 775 and it goes up to 784. So if you have a spouse and you look at these numbers, you both are going to probably, as average, $1,500 a month. Well, here's $3,000 a month right now you would have in retirement without saving any money. And the beautiful thing about these is that you keep getting them as long as you're alive. Then you should be looking into RSP savings. There's also what we call LIRA, locked-in retirement accounts. If you work somewhere else and you had a pension, you get to move it into what we call a LIRA. But when you contribute to an RSP, you get a tax deduction for that amount, and it's the marginal tax rate, not the average tax rate, so you actually save more money. But when you pull it out, when it grows, you don't pay any tax, but when you pull it out at retirement, it's 100% taxable. Great vehicle. If you're making under $50,000, you probably don't need to do it because you'd only get 20% back. You kind of save your room for when you actually start making more money over the 50,000, and then you start looking at and working with a financial advisor to kind of know what number you should be putting into an RSP. The one thing you should have open is a tax-free savings account. Now, the banking lobby had a great field day with this one because they named it a tax-free savings account. And we notice with all our new clients, they always have one at a bank with very little money in it, and it's sitting in cash. I don't know if you guys know what kind of interest rate you get from a bank, but it's probably 0.25% to 0.4. And that's, you get that tax-free, whippy. That's not enough. It should have been called a tax-free investing account. It would have helped the consumer understand. In a tax-free savings account, you can have stocks, you can have mutual funds, you can have bonds, you can have gold, silver. You can have that inside your tax-free savings account, and you don't pay any tax on any of the growth. So this, when we're looking at our buckets, this is the most aggressive account we have for our clients because we want it to grow, and we want to don't pay it, and we don't want to pay any tax on that growth. Currently, the limit, if you were 18 in 2009, you have $102,000 worth of room. It moves up right now, it's $7,000 a year. So how it works is you just open one, you don't get a deduction on your taxes, but any of the growth you don't have to pay on in the future. So encourage you all to have one of these, and this is where you should be putting a lot of your money. Once the TFSA is full, these are other areas that you can open another account. We call it a non-registered account. Some people call it open or an investment account. But when you open in this style of an account, you really need to know what interest, dividends, and capital gains are. Interest income earned on this fund, whatever you're invested in. So if you're in a GIC, 100% of that GIC percentage is taxed. So if you're at a high income and paying 40%, now you just made money and you're giving 40% back just on interest. So dividends are taxed at 67% and capital gains are taxed at 50%. So this is the only account you really need to know what you're investing in. The problem I have with our government, interest income is for people that are conservative. Capital gains are for people that are aggressive. And to me, they should all be the same. I don't know why they're different. From what my understanding from the capital gain side is, the government wants you to invest in Canadian-controlled corporations so they can also use the money and grow themselves. So you're helping the economy by doing that, by buying that stock compared to just putting it that just gets something that has interest. As well, in some of those deferred capital gains comes along, which is getting tougher and tougher to find inside one of these accounts. And then return of capital, when you go to pull money out, there's a way, we call it Series T. So if you had a couple $100,000 in this account when you retired, in theory, you could take the first couple $100,000 out over about 15 or 18 period. It's called return of capital. You pay no tax. But then the tax bill's big for your beneficiaries. But sometimes we have people that say to us, I want my last check to bounce when I die. I don't care if I leave any money. Right? So for that individual, this is kind of important. But for people that want to leave for their kids or beneficiaries, it's not the best avenue to go. If you haven't purchased a home yet, and you don't have what we call the first-time homebuyer savings account open, you need to do that right away. You're allowed to contribute up to $40,000 into one of these, we call it FISA. But you can only put $8,000 a year. Unlike the tax-free savings account, if you don't have one open, I could put $102,000 in that today. In this, you can't. You can only put $8,000 in a year, and they only allow you to carry forward for 2 years. So even if you don't have the $8,000 and you threw $100 into one of these accounts, next year you'd have the opportunity to put in $15,900. So if you haven't purchased the home yet, you want to use this, you want to get these open. I don't like that the government made it that way, but you don't pay any, as you put money into FISA, you get a tax receipt so you can use it as an RSP. So you get a deduction to put it in here, but when you go to pull it out, you don't have to pay any tax on it, and you don't have to pay it back. The old version of the home buyer's plan was we were allowed to borrow from our RSP now it's up to $35,000. but we had to pay that back after 2 years living in the house and start paying 1/15 back to your RSP, or you got taxed on it. So you could use both in this, but if you don't have one open, very important to kind of get one of these open. These are just some other areas that you can also have income. Some people like to have property. Some people have family trusts or spousal trusts that they might be getting money from. Wealth insurance is really just permanent insurance, which we call whole life. It has a cash component inside it. So if your tax-free savings account would be full, it's a nice way to also kind of hide money and pull it out tax-free in retirement. There could be money in your corp. You might have money, like I said, from a pension, inheritance. So there's lots of different buckets when you get, hopefully, you retire. And I always tell people the people with the most buckets tend to win because they have everything full. We like to talk about diversification. I know the younger people that we're dealing with now are pretty steady on the stocks and different things like that. But when you go to retire, you don't want to hold 2 or 3 stocks. You need to be diversified, and that's in sectors as well as geography. You need to be involved in Europe. You need to be involved in the US, and you also need to be involved in Canada. And people that are just with proper diversification, it really protects you when the markets go down. So when you think the markets are going to be down, be in a mutual fund. If you think the markets are going to go up, it's okay to own stock. We only use actively managed money inside all our clients here. It's a run by our chief investment strategist, Philip Peterson. He does a wonderful job, and he has leeway to move money geographically inside the fund as well as segments. He did a great job for us this year. He pulled a lot of money out of US in November and then again in January. The market in the US was down 25% April 16th, and he went back in. So our clients right now are seeing double-digit returns for the third year. The tough thing when we get into retirement is we've lived 40 years trying to make sure we paid the least amount of tax last year. Volatility really helps you while you're accumulating money, but when it goes the other way, it's bad because you're going to run out of time, and you're going to have, if you're pulling money out of a fund that's going down, that's really bad. So when we do that, 2008, obviously, if you're old enough to remember that the financial crisis was a really bad time for a lot of people in retirement because they were fully invested and the market dropped 40%. So their retirement nest egg dropped by 40%, and they kept pulling money out because they needed it monthly. What we do is we set up what we call a cash wedge. So if you need 2 years worth of money, we put in cash so you don't have to follow the market. You don't have to worry about not sleeping at night. If it did go down, we have your cash and allow it to not go down in retirement. So sequence of returns is really important too when you retire. Not when you're growing. You want it to jump all over the place when you're putting money in, but when you retire, I just thought I'd show a quick sequence of returns. If you got 5% 1 year, 5% year 2, and 5% year 3 in the market, your rate of return. So on average, if you had $100,000 at 65 and you made those 3 returns, 3 in a row, your money's going to last until you're 89. If you take the same 100,000 and move it, and this is $600 withdrawal, right? So that's what we're doing in this exercise. Now let's just change these around and still have a 5% average return for 3 years. But the first year we did 5% up. The second year it went up 25%. So a fantastic year in the market. But then year 3, it was minus 15. Well, what did that do? Well, sequence of returns here, now your money is going to be out by the time you're 87, just because of how that worked. Let's change it one more time just to show you. 5% year 1, minus 15 the second year, and then plus 25 the third. So over the 3-year period, an average rate of return of 5%. What did that do? It dropped you down to 83 years old, pulling the same $600 a month out. So sequence of returns and understanding the market is very, very important when you retire. You want it, like I said, when you're growing. So poor early performance, if you're not set up right with the right cash wedge in retirement, can actually alter your plans And sometimes, the last thing I want to tell someone is dust off your resume. I think you need to go back to work at 71 because you're going to run out of money. So trying to plan obviously is really difficult when it's is it 83, 85, 87. So that's one thing that we build in the plan. We kind of make sure that we're conservative. Better planning obviously makes more peace of mind so you can retire and be comfortable. Spending wisely, we like I said earlier, we always find people that save right to 65, saved way too much money, but did a great job of it. But there's not like a switch now that they can go spend it. So they always have a tendency to spend wisely and always have money left over. One thing that we make sure that we factor into all our plans is inflation. Inflation is unavoidable. We look at the 20-year rate when we're doing our planning. So we put in a rate of 2.5%, where the 20-year average in the last 20 years, it's 2.1%. And I don't have to explain inflation to you. We see it every year with our green fees and all the costs that we have at clubs. They tend to go up. So if you had the same $100 from 10 years ago, it doesn't spend the same amount of $100 today. It's more like $65. So we build this into our planning to make sure that inflation, you're getting more every year. So if it's $10,000 a month you need now, 20 years from now, that's more like $14,000 a month when you tend to have retirement. Okay. Obviously, the longer you live has a bigger impact. Another rule of thumb that we look at when people say, how much do I need to retire on, or how much money should I have? And again, this is where it gets a little more difficult, but if you only took 4% of what you saved out, you will never run out of money. So if you saved $1 million over your lifetime when you got to 65, if you took out $40,000 a year, you will never run out of money before 90 for sure. Again, we have to listen to the client and say, well, I want my last paycheck to bounce. So that's probably more in the 5 or 6% range. But at 4%, you probably have a good start at a retirement of $1 million. By the time you retire, you'll have more money than you did when you were at 65. So rule of thumb is 4 or 5% you can withdraw out of your nest egg and have a very comfortable retirement. This does not include the government CPP and OAS. This is just strictly what you saved. Obviously, the IG likes you to use 3% because they want to keep more of your money, but really the number is 4 to 5%. And if you look at 10%, we have some people that have to pull out money quickly. Obviously, you're going to run out of money in 10 or 11 years if you're pulling out 10% out of that nest egg. And if you spend too much, it doesn't matter how good the market does. You just don't know what you're doing. And again, this is just another chart that kind of shows from 1970, if you had $500,000 when you retired and took out 8%, you would have run out of money within 20 years. If you took out 6%, you would have had money for 40 years. But if you would have only taken 4% out, you would have had more than $3 million on that $500,000 portfolio. And that's a 70s one. We always got to look at the market today. Back then, interest rates were a little cuckoo. They're not like as low as they are now. So obviously that's a change. So that's why you need to work with somebody. Smarter spending, I don't have to say that. Managing your legacy. I always like to let people know, and it's not a lot of fun if someone was to die without a will. So I encourage you all to get a will, whether you're married or not. You don't want the government deciding where your money goes. Now, I can tell you the government is pretty good that if you don't have a will, it's going to be going to your family. It's not going somewhere else, but it could go to your mom and dad, but it might go to your brother and sister, and it might go to maybe not your spouse or live in. So it's important that you have one so you can dictate where your money goes. If you have kids, you need one right away because you don't want the government telling the kids where they're going to stay. We've had some instances here in Kitchener-Waterloo where a gentleman died 6 months ago. He was 35, and his wife died 2 years earlier. There's 2 kids, and both sides of the family want the kids. So since they don't have a will, it's in court, and the court's going to decide where the kids go. So if you have kids and you don't have one, there is some online that you can print off. If you have a blended family, I encourage you to actually see a lawyer because they can be contestable, and make sure that you get it done right. And again, this just talks about why you need a will. We just want to make sure that anything that you're doing is fair. You want to make sure that you're giving it to the people you want to give it to, and you want to make sure your kids are looked after. Pretty simple, but now with no wills, it's really becoming a problem. And just say, I want to leave that to my kids just isn't enough, especially have vacation property. I have a cottage, so I can't just say I'm leaving it to my kids. When I die, or when my wife dies, I'll die before my wife, obviously by the numbers. But there's going to be a capital gain on that vacation property. So if they can't afford to pay it, they're going to lose the cottage. So it's always good to plan for that. Any vacation property, anyway. Principal residences that you have, they are tax free when you die. So your kids will be getting that. They could use some of that money to make sure they keep the cottage in the family. But the tough thing is do your kids get along? Do they make the same amount of income? You don't want them fighting. I want to build a new dock. I don't have any money. I don't want the new dock. And now the kids just start fighting all the time. So take the pain and suffering away from your family and get yourself a will. When we look at advanced planning for retirement, we're trying to make sure that less money goes to the CRA. We've had some instances where people don't need their RSP or RIF money. They can live off CPP and OAS. They don't have any bills that they have to pay. One of the problems with that is leaving money in an RSP, it's 100% taxable the day you die. Unless you have a spouse, you roll it over to your spouse. But if your spouse died with my brother-in-law's father was 76 years old, and his mom died a year before, and he had $600,000 in his RIF. So that's classified as income. He wrote a check for $280,000 to the CRA for tax. So this is why you got to make sure you're planning. I thought I'd put up here, we have a lot of offices in BC. IG's kind of Canada-wide. There's some great people that work for us. But like I said, it doesn't have to be IG. It could be someone with a CFP that understands how to do planning. In retirement, it is a journey. Like I said, nearly retired, it's like vacation. And then as you get experience, it gets a little more difficult. And then we have to make sure that we're looking at what money is left over to get to your beneficiaries. So I thought I would just throw this up here to kind of have a look at it. This is kind of our plan. You can see this plan here is at 105%. This person never going to run out of money until they're 90 years old. Liquidation order, I know we kind of talk about that. And this is just some graphs showing with our current tax situation and tax rules. This is what we use. And this is just all the different accounts where the money's coming from while you're retired. So it's important to kind of have a plan, and make sure the planning has the what ifs. What happens if someone dies? What happens if inflation's higher than it's supposed to? What happens if the market dropped by 30%? We put that in the plan to make sure our clients are comfortable. Income splitting happens when you're 65, unless you own a corporation. You can do income splitting with your wife. It's getting a little more difficult, so or spouse, or I should say spouse. They have to work for you to actually income split, and you can't overpay them, but you can pay them. And it helps if you had a corporation where you're making $150,000, $200,000, you can pay yourself $100,000, you can pay your spouse $50,000. You can kind of make sure that your family taxable income is a lot lower than if you just pay yourself $150,000. So the IG living plan, we just like it. Obviously, we're the only one or we're the only people that are using it actively with all our clients. And that's why I encourage you to see what IG is doing, because they are doing everything possible to help people in the future. Cost when it comes to IG, everyone charges an advisor fee, and they're probably similar across the board. Here in Ontario, you go to RBC, you go to Scotiabank, you go to Bank of Montreal, they charge the same as what we do. So go to the person that's the smartest. And if there's any takeaways from this presentation, all I want you to kind of make sure you do is find someone to go have lunch with, um, just to talk about what you should be doing. Like I said, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And make sure you get a TFSA open and start saving into that as well. The FISHA, if you haven't bought your first home, get one of those open right away. That kind of wraps up my presentation. Uh, I always have this little picture at the end just to say, don't do it by yourself. So you wouldn't teach yourself golf. You always have a golf coach. So get yourself someone that understands the tax system inside and out, and you will be forever thankful. And that's it. So we could probably go to some questions, Mark, if we have some.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brad. Ton of great information in there. We did already have a question as well, whether the this session was going to be recorded. Confirm that it is. So yeah, a bunch of members may want to go back, rewatch, or especially certain portions. So of course, those will be available. But thank you again, Brad. That was
Oh,
fantastic
you're on mute.
stuff. I got a couple of questions myself that
Oh,
I'd love to
okay.
throw at you if I could. You started talking about incorporation, kind of at the start of the presentation. And so that's one question a lot of golf pros might have. Is that the advisable setup or structure if you're looking to set up, I'm going to say maybe your own generic, whether it's a consulting business or, separate from maybe the direct employment that you may have from a facility if you're looking to have a side hustle, kind of so to speak, I guess. Is that the preferred way to go?
Um, Corporation, if you have liability, an issue with liability and or too much money to pay yourself. Because you can park your money in the corporation and the first 500 grand that you make inside a corp, you're only taxed at 12%. Right? So if you made extra money, it's a good spot to have that. Most people in the golf business aren't there yet unless they own their shop.
Gotcha.
So it's best to just be a sole proprietor, which
Okay.
is just like you're on your own. It's not incorporated, so there's less tax deductions that there would be in a corporation. Because when you open a corporation, you got to probably pay about 4 grand to get it set up, and then you also have to do a tax return every year. So if there's no liability and not extra money, you don't need to set a corporation up. You can do it as a sole proprietor, and just do it that way. So you're paying yourself and then subtracting your expenses, then paying tax.
Gotcha. Okay. No, makes sense. Thank you very much. One other question I had, again, another personal one. I've been hearing for kind of years, CPP benefits, are they going to run out at some point, or is the program going to change? So should someone of a certain age in their planning go, you know what, don't even rely on that, just pretend government may not be helping you out. Where do you stand on that, I guess, in terms of
Yeah. I
advice?
was told in high school I would not have CPP either when
Okay.
I retire.
Yeah.
And it's been an ongoing issue. A lot of people don't know this, but Brian Mulroney, if you're old enough to remember, when he was prime minister, the old money for CPP used to go into the tax base. He made it a different account that the government couldn't spend. So now it keeps growing every year. And we were told because the baby boomers now are retiring, they're going to suck all the money out of that CPP benefit. But there's $75 billion in it. It's never going to run out of money. So we do plan for it. You can take CPP early at 60 instead of 65, but you take a 36% discount to take it early. And if you take it at 70, they add 42% to it. So we use the planning tool to find that sweet spot of when you should. We do not let anybody that's healthy take it before they're 65.
Gotcha.
All you have to do is live 10 years. So if you took it at 70 and made it to 80, you made the right choice because you're going to get more money, right? And that number I had is 1,300. If you waited to 70, that'd be about 2,100 a month. So sometimes when people don't have a lot of money, we get them to delay CPP, spend their money from 65 to 70, and then start CPP because that number is guaranteed for the rest of their life.
That's interesting.
Mhm. So
Um,
there's lots of little different zigzags that we look at, but you have to be sick to start it at 60. I can tell you 15 years ago when I started working here, every financial planner in this building told everyone to take it at 60. Big mistake.
mm,
Now that we have the right planning tools to show it, big mistake.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. No, very interesting. You also mentioned life insurance, kind of early on. So I guess as a vehicle, as golf professionals, members of the PGA of Canada, we do have a certain amount of life insurance provided, by the association there. I guess what would be maybe some of your main considerations for some of our members, either to what would make sense to pursue more life insurance over and above that? Is there a certain way you'd want to, leverage or utilize that as well?
Yeah. What we usually look at when you're young, because you don't have a lot of money, is you look at term. And when we say term, I call it temporary. So there's term 10 policies, term 20, term 65. So they stop at 65 years old or in 20 years or 10 years. We usually look at making sure, especially if you have a young family, that you would cover off debt. So cover off your mortgage. Some people like to make sure my child's education's paid for. So we try to come up with numbers. If you're pretty young, $1 million term 10 or term 20 policy is going to cost you $25 a month.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The bad thing is it is called temporary. So when you get to be 75, you won't keep it because it's way too expensive.
Mhm.
That's when we start looking at whole life product. If you have extra money in the corp, sometimes we have the corp on it and it's a whole life product. And whole life product has the insurance part as well as a cash account. And most Canada Life and Manulife right now pay a 6% dividend to you every year. So it's really important to know that. Sometimes we take people's fixed income product off the shelf and put it into a whole life policy. It grows double as quick and it's tax free when you pull it out.
Yeah.
But term policies, you kind of want to make sure you cover debt. Some people say, well, after 2 years, you're going to get remarried, or, I always make sure when I'm dealing with insurance is what does your spouse want? Not what you want, because you're not here. I want the spouse to call me and say, am I okay? And I want them to say yes. Because sometimes we always have someone that doesn't like life insurance.
Sure. Yeah. No, very much makes sense. Brad, thank you so much for your time, your preparation, sharing all this valuable information with, assisting all of our golf pros with their financial planning. On behalf of all those pros in attendance today, we very much appreciate you helping us. So thank you.